to this now. It is one of the leading stories we take you back to now, which is AfriForum and Solidarity's Support Center for Schools. They threatening legal action against the implementation of the BELA Act. Now, the groups accuse President Cyril Ramaphosa of acting irrationally by approving the law in full. AfriForum CEO Kallie Kriel is my guest this afternoon, and he joins us now. Mr. Kriel, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. When you say the president acted irrationally by signing this particular piece of legislation in full without any amendments, are you not, in a way, overstepping? Because some people are going to say the president gave this process 3 months. This was over and above him applying his mind to the law before him, before it became law, before he signed it into law. Simply, I'm trying to get to the question about this, and many people saying it took a long time before this piece of legislation was approved. So when you're going to say the president acted irrationally, what do you have to provide as some kind of proof?
Yes, good afternoon to you, sir. Well, the proof we have is documents that we have that were signed by government itself. Our colleagues from Solidarity at NETLAC went into an agreement mandated by the president, signed by the Minister of Basic Education, in which it states that the proposal would be that certain sections of the BELA Act will not be promulgated until such time as there are adequate norms and standards developed. And of course, there was then also advice from the Minister of Basic Education sent to the President, stating that it is common cause that there are not sufficient norms and standards and regulations for certain sections to be promulgated, and that that should not be done at the moment until such time as the relevant norms and standards has been developed. So it is actually irrational, while that is common cause, that there are not norms and standards, to go ahead and promulgate certain sections, especially because it now creates a dangerous situation that those people, for instance, the Gauteng government, that are attacking Afrikaans schools, can now abuse this process because there are not clear guidelines for them, and that is irrational, and we believe we have a strong case.
Yeah. Before we get to the Afrikaans schools that you say are being targeted, and I think part of your argument is the language policy that also becomes part of that. When you say this is irrational behavior on the part of the president, has it never been done before that a law is promulgated while the regulations, while what you call the norms and standards, are being put together? Is that something that is out of step with what we have seen in the past?
Well, it depends on what law we're speaking about. Of course, there are numerous laws that don't need norms and standards to regulate it. But especially in a case like this, where power is given to one person, the head of department of a province, to give instructions with regard to language policy. If such power is too broad, it can lead to an abuse of power. And I think there's a lot of court cases indicating that there should be clarity with regards to the power of any official and how it should be exercised. So there are no guidelines. You can now have department head simply taking a decision driven by an anti-Afrikaans ideology or some other ideology, and there are not guidelines. So in this specific case, we believe it's clear that there should be guidelines that should be taken into account by the head of the department. That was acknowledged in the agreement at NETLAC, It was acknowledged in the advice sent to the President by the Minister of Basic Education. And for us, it's unfortunate because now the setting up and developing of norms and standards will take about probably a year or a year and a half. And now for this time in between, Afrikaans schools are at the mercy of officials.
Yeah. I'm keen to know what your response or attitude will be to people or critics who are going to dismiss what you are suggesting and say this is all designed to preserve Afrikaans schools and in so doing blocking other children who may not be Afrikaans speaking from entering those schools, because the preservation of Afrikaans schools, embedded in it is the language policy, which is part and parcel of what you are arguing.
Of course, those arguments are false, and it is being used as a guise to be able to attack Afrikaans schools. We should also apply those same arguments towards English schools. There are many people in this country that don't speak English. Are they then excluded from those schools unfairly? The fact is, it's a fallacy that now we want to choose a language that has colonial origins as the language of inclusivity. That is not true. Second false assumption that is being made is that Afrikaans schools are exclusive. And I'll pay any person 10,000 Rand if they can show me a single Afrikaans public school that is exclusive. My children went to a public Afrikaans school, and there are numerous people from various communities. The majority of Afrikaans speaking people are colored people. So this is something that is simply used as an argument. We should rather say, if we want access to education, then we should move to multilingualism.
So here's the argument, Kallie. I'm sorry to interrupt your thought process there. The argument will be when you say, here's a colonial language, English, that is being used, and people are not being excluded there. The only difference here is that in those schools, there are other languages that are on offer as second languages. If you go to private schools, for example, yes, the medium of instruction will be in English, but children are also, they have the option of choosing either a Zulu, isiXhosa, or Sesotho as a second language. Is that the kind of practice that is followed in Afrikaans medium schools?
Not at all of them. There are numerous schools that does provide that, but our proposals during our negotiations also with the ANC was to say make at least 3 official languages compulsory as a language subject. So we are all in favor of that. We should have, depending on in which community the Afrikaans school is situated, here in Pretoria, it can either be Sepedi or Setswana. In KwaZulu-Natal, it can be isiZulu. So those are the kind of things that can be done to promote multilingualism.
Can I ask you quickly? Can I ask you quickly then, based on that very answer, what has stopped the school governing bodies in the Afrikaans medium schools to take that decision instead of waiting for the legislation? Because had you taken that proactive step, perhaps we would not be talking about this. I think where we possibly are missing each other, Kallie, is that the country is moving in a direction that says we are a united people. We are not going to have enclaves where Afrikaans is spoken here and no one else can interact with that community simply because the community is intent on making sure that there is purity in the Afrikaans language, the Afrikaans way of doing things, because that also cascades to culture, you then end up having your Oranias that are seen as enclaves.
Well, of course, as I've said previously, that is a fallacy. There are no exclusive Afrikaans schools. But why can't we also argue what people that want to target Afrikaans schools, they are now going to try and make sure that we have English enclaves. The fact is, you said that in English schools you have other languages as subjects, only in a few private schools and a few public schools. The majority of them don't have that. And that is something that should be promoted also by government to make sure that there is enough study materials, to make sure that there is enough teachers that are available to teach those subjects. I just had a discussion with a primary headmaster the other day in a primary school in Pretoria that has a subject Sepedi, but he's struggling to get trained teachers in that regard. So there are numerous factors at play, and there will not be resistance to do that. The fact is, if you look at the Constitution, it speaks of unity in diversity. That means we should promote unity, but recognize diversity.
Yeah.
And if diversity means there is an Afrikaans community, to now portray an Afrikaans community as an enclave or something that is terrible, you are going against the constitutional principle of inclusivity and unity in diversity.
Kallie Kriel, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully we can speak closer to the 10 days that you have given government to respond to this. Otherwise, I think court action is going to result. Am I correct?
Yes, most definitely. And thank you for the interview.
Thank you very much. Only a pleasure. Thank you. Kallie Kriel, CEO of AfriForum.